Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Avodah Zarah. This is our second class, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 8 through 14. Just to make a preface, I said it last week, but I'll say it again this week. If this Masechet deals with idolatry and idolaters, meaning people who worship idols, pagan gods. If I say the word non-Jew in this class, I do not mean, regular non-Jew. I mean a person who is not Jewish who worships idols. So it's important for me if I'll try, again, as I said last week, I'll try to say idolater, just a lot of syllables. So if I say non-Jew, I think it's one less syllable. So just understand that I mean an idol worshiper. Okay, so we are beginning a little bit down on Daf 8 at the Mishnah. So last week we had mentioned, the Mishnah told us that you are not allowed to do business with idolaters around their holidays. So today we're going to discuss what these holidays are. So the Mishnah tells us that the following are the holidays of the pagans. There's Calenda, Saturnalia, there's Pratesim. These are all around the winter solstice. We'll talk more about exactly what they are in a minute. And then there's Yom Ginusia of the emperor. We'll also discuss what that is. The birthday and the death day of the emperor. Again, this is generally, again, the Mishnah and the Gemara speaking about Roman times. But it could also be Greeks. We're going to talk about all of the different other nations. And then the Gemara, we mentioned the day that the emperor died. So another opinion is it depends. If they burnt his things when he died, that means that he is very important and there was idolatry involved on that day. Therefore, that day becomes a day that's forbidden for business with Jews. A day that the idolater shaves his beard, or the day that he returned from the sea, or the day that he makes a wedding, all of those days, again, are personal holidays, but days that they will be very grateful to their idol or their god, and therefore you are not allowed to do business with that person on that day. For other holidays, meaning I guess we can call it national holidays, national pagan holidays, then we'll see, we saw it last week, but also we'll see it this week. It's a few days before and a few days maybe after. Okay, so now we're going to talk about these holidays. The Gemara explains, Calenda is 8 days after the winter solstice. Saturnalia is 8 days before the winter solstice. So there was a lot of partying around the winter solstice. And now we're going to speak about Adam, right? Adam. And what's so special about the winter solstice? So the Gemara tells us that Adam noticed that the days were getting shorter, and he started getting nervous and thought that, it's just going to get shorter and shorter and shorter till there's no daytime at all, right? Because don't forget, it was the first time that he experienced winter. So what happened? He fasted for 8 days, and then once the solstice passed, then the days started getting longer, and then he made it into an 8-day holiday. Now, you would say, wait a minute, we were just talking about pagan holidays, and then you're talking about Adam HaRishon. Didn't Adam HaRishon know who God was? So the answer is yes, meaning the Gemara says that Adam HaRishon made these holidays for Hashem, for God, but his descendants kind of lost their connection to Hashem, to our God, and then ended up remembering that there was a holiday, but forgetting who it was for, and therefore they actually did it for their idols, and therefore these 8 days before, I guess December 21st, right, and 8 days after were a pagan holiday. This is, now I don't know if you remember, but in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, we had a machloket, when was the world created? If you remember, there were two opinions. One is in Tishrei, which is why we have Rosh Hashanah, right? So one is, I guess we will say, in the fall. And the other opinion is that it was in Nisan, right? In the spring, when we celebrate Pesach. So again, what did we say? Adam was created, and then the days started getting shorter. So the Gemara says that makes sense if he was created in the fall, right? He was created in the fall, and then the days get shorter till you get to December, and that's where he's getting nervous. But if he was created in the spring, wait a minute, he already saw short days, and then he saw long days, and then it started getting short days, so why would he be nervous? So the Gemara says, no, but even if he was if he was created in the spring, he never went through a winter. And that's why even if he was created in the spring, it still works out that he would be nervous in the winter. Since we're talking about Adam being nervous, let's go to the first day of that he was created, right? On day 6 of creation, when Adam was created. So they say that Adam got nervous when the sun started setting, right? He was created, it was daytime. All of a sudden, the sun starts going down, and he's like, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? So he was really nervous. So what did he do? He fasted all day, and then when the sun rose, he realized, oh, I get it. It's like a natural cycle that the sun's going to set and the sun is going to rise. So then he sacrificed an ox, and this was the ox of creation. Don't forget that Hashem didn't necessarily create many animals at a time, maybe only one or two, but this one seems to have been very special. It had one horn, one could call it a unicorn, but that is the special ox that Adam sacrificed on that next day when he realized that the day would naturally the sun would rise and the sun would set. Okay, now going back to our Roman holiday, we said that in a city where they celebrate this holiday, you can't do business with them. Now, what about cities around Rome? So can you do business with them around these holidays? It seems that this holiday was only celebrated in Rome. So what about the cities around it? So the Gemara says, no, it's only forbidden to do business with people in a city where they are celebrating this holiday, but not in other cities where they are not celebrating this holiday. Okay. Hold on a minute. Then the Gemara says, sometimes, Jews have to be very careful outside of Israel because sometimes they do idolatry by accident. What does that mean? They might get invited to a non-Jew's wedding, and even if they eat kosher food, right, it's as if they're eating from the idol or from these pagans. And therefore, you shouldn't go to these pagans' weddings. You shouldn't go to their house for not only for the wedding, but even 30 days after their wedding, because you're still getting the benefit of that wedding. And I guess according to this, it seems that there were rituals to the idols during the celebrations. Some say for 30 days after the wedding, some say even up to 12 months, because it still could be getting benefit from idolatry. Again, as we mentioned last week, a Jew is not allowed to benefit from idolatry, from idols, from idol worship. You have to be very careful. We mentioned Cartesim. So what is this? This is the day that Rome seized power, and when they conquered Cleopatra, and then again from the Greeks, and the Gemara gives a story of how Rome took over from Greece. Right, we know they're the next empire that took power. And then the Gemara tells us that for 26 years, the Romans were faithful to the Jews, and then they decided to subjugate the Jews, and then decreed all these terrible things against the Jews. Right? The Roman and it says that the Romans or Rome decreed that giving smicha is rabbinic ordination. It's not what we have nowadays. I mean, nowadays there is rabbinic ordination, but in those days it was a very serious title that you would give to your student who you taught for many, many years. It was something that was very powerful, and the Romans said that if you do this, it is forbidden, and you'll get killed, they'll get killed, the city that you do it in is going to get killed, everybody you know it. Basically, they're going to kill anybody associated with giving smicha. And this, then the Gemara gives a very famous story. We've seen it before. The story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, who wanted to give smicha to his 5 top students, and this was, again, the idea of smicha is not only to make the person a rabbi, but it's a way to transmit the tradition, meaning it went from teacher to student. And again, in the time of the Roman persecution, it was very important to maintain the line of transmission of tradition. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba said, I need to give smicha to my students. What did he do? He sat between 2 mountains far away from any city so that the Romans wouldn't be able to kill anybody else. And he gave smicha to 5 rabbis. These are like the 5 rabbis of the Gemara, right? Of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Right? These are very famous rabbis who mamash like continue the tradition. And then, right, the Romans find out. So the teacher, Rabbi Yehuda, sends them all away. And they say, we're not leaving, we're not leaving. He says, you have to leave me because this is my time. Like, I needed to do this. And he gets them to go away. And basically, he is killed in a very terrible way by the Romans. Okay. Okay. From here, since we're talking about Rome and Greece, so now the Gemara talks about the timeline of these different empires and how we are going to calculate the year, and we'll see why in a minute. So Daf 9 tells us that the Romans ruled over Israel for 180 years before the destruction of the temple, right? The Romans were already in Israel before they destroyed the temple, so 180 years before the temple. And then, right, the Gemara gives us a timeline. It goes from the Persians to the Greeks to the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, to Herod, and okay, so now we're going to see that there were 2 different ways to date documents. So date documents and count the year, right? We're just very used to open Google Calendar, you know the date, it's fine, you know the year, sometimes you forget, but we're very clear of what the date is. In those days, there aren't really, I mean, there are calendars, but not the way we understand them. So the question is, how do you calculate the year? So there were 2 ways to calculate. There were 2 countings of the year. One is from the destruction of the of the temple. And the other is the scribes would date contracts from when the Greeks started ruling in Israel. So their empire started 6 years after they came to power, which is 380 years before the destruction of the temple. So therefore, now again, right? So you have 300, you have, if you're counting from the destruction of the temple, and if you're counting from when the Greeks started, that would be 380 years beforehand. So the Gemara gives a calculation how you can put these two dates together. So the Gemara also says, right, it makes sense that you know the 1,000 digit and you know the 100 digit. It's the tens and the ones that you're not sure, right? Everyone, well, not everyone, many people know, if you know the Hebrew year, right? So the Jewish year is 5785. So you might forget, is it 85? Is it 84? Right? But you know that it's 5 and you know that it's 7, right? Because you're not going to make a miscalculation of 100 years, right? But you might not remember, is it 84, 83, right? 72, right? So how do we figure out the tens and ones? So basically, right, you can, so going back to, again, the two different calendars, a Tana who's going to calculate from the destruction of the temple can take the date of the scribes, which is 380 years beforehand, and then calculate, right, the difference between that year, right, those years. And the Gemara goes through a lot of different calculations. If you want, you can see it on Daf 9. I don't want to get too into it because then you're going to get like a little flustered with all the numbers. Speaking of numbers, right, and speaking of the Jewish calendar, so we know that, right, this is 5785, and we've seen this before. The Gemara tells us that history is going to be 6,000 years, right? The idea is that it's 1,000 years for every day of creation. That's one, or every day of the week. So what are these 6,000 years, right? The world is going to exist for 6,000 years. 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah, 2,000 years of Moshiach. Now, obviously, Moshiach hasn't come yet, so the Gemara says, yeah, he could have come, but we weren't worthy. So again, we're in those years where Moshiach should have come, but he's late because of our sins. Okay, we mentioned that there's 2,000 years of Torah. Now, when did that start? Did it start when we got the Torah? But if you know, I don't know if you all know, but Matan Torah is year 2448 of the Jewish calendar. Again, this year we are in 5787. Matan Torah was 2448. From creation, right? So that's Matan Torah. Now, 2448, we said that the years of Torah start at 2000. So how are we off by 448 years? So the Gemara says, you're right. Really, the years of Torah start when Abraham recognized God in Haran. And the Gemara does the calculation. You can if you want, but the Gemara says it's when Abraham was 52 years old. And that's how we get the 448, which is missing from the 2000. And it's exactly 2,000 years of Torah. Oh, 5785. Thank you, Zohar. I'm even like confused. Thank you. This year is 5785. Thank you, Zohar. Okay. Next. Then, since we're talking about calculations, let's say you want to calculate what year we are in the Shemitah cycle, right? We know that Shemitah is every 7 years. It's in blocks of 7, and it started from the Beit HaMikdash. So you basically add the years of the Beit HaMikdash, and then you divide by 7. The Gemara also talks about the years the Jubilee years, the year of Yovel. So you do have to account for after every 49 years. So in every 100 years, there are 2 years that are extra that you have to add in your calculation. Okay, next, Daf 10 tells us that, let's say you find a document, right, a contract that has an extra 6 years on the date. So one opinion is that it's post-dated, right, like a post-dated check. And we know that that is not a valid contract, right? You cannot have a post-dated check, post-dated contract. Or the Gemara says maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's the scribe that was being very exact. If you remember, I said that the Greeks ruled an extra 6 years, and therefore, right, it was before they controlled all of Israel, and therefore some people might add that extra 6 years, but they mean to, right, they didn't mean to post date the document, they mean for it to be right now. Okay. Then the Gemara talks about, right, maybe he was counting from Yitziat Mitzrayim, but that's 1,000 years before the Greeks started ruling. And then, right, then maybe it is post-dated, and we say no, right? In Galut, when you're outside of Israel, you only count according to the Greek rule, right? We do not, right, when you are writing a contract, you have to put in what I guess we would call the non-Jewish calendar, right? In those days, it was from the Greek rule, right? And we see how the Gemara tells us that, right, the non-Jewish kings, their year would start in Tishrei, and the year of the Jewish king would start in Nisan, right, in the spring, right, in different times. Okay, going back to the different festivals of the pagans. So we said there's Yom Gnusia. What is that? That's the day that they coronated the Roman emperor. And it needs to be the day that he was coronated, or maybe this Yom Gnusia is the emperor's birthday, or maybe it's his son's birthday, or maybe it's the day that the son became the emperor. All of those are options. Now, since we're talking about Roman emperors, we have the very famous stories of Antoninus. Antoninus was the emperor of Rome, and he was very close with Rebbi. And the Gemara gives us a lot of stories of the relationship that they had. Now, it is important to understand, right, that there were many times that the Romans were horrible to the Jews, and this happens to be one very positive Roman-Jewish interaction. So, and my point is that it was very unique. And Antoninus asked Rebbi, you know, I want my son to be the emperor, and I don't want this area to be taxed, but I can't ask for both of those things. So what should I do? Right? So he was asking Rebbi for advice. So Rebbi, we'll see a few times, gives him like a message that's like in code, right? Because he doesn't want to tell it to him right, you know, straight out. So what does he do? Rebbi tells one person to stand on another person and tell the lower person to tell the upper person to release a bird, right? So then, right, Antoninus understood, right? He was very smart. Oh, I should ask Rome, right? Basically, what was he saying? Ask Rome to make your son the emperor, and then tell your son to release this area from taxes, right? So you only have to ask Rome for one thing, but you get both of those things. Another story, Antoninus told Rebbi that these dignitaries in Rome were driving him crazy, and he didn't know what to do. So Rebbi basically picked a radish every day in front of him. So Antoninus understood, oh, I should kill them off one at a time. right? Like one every day, right? But slowly, right? Again, Rebbe didn't want to say it out loud. He was afraid of spies. Another story, Antoninus's daughter had an affair and he wanted advice from Rebbe, like, what should I do? So he sent him and this is all like a play on words. So I'll tell you what he did, and then I'll tell you the word, right? So he sent him this herb, which was called Vergira, because his heart was nigrar, right? It was like her heart was like pulled to sin, right? So like nigrar means to be pulled. So he sent him like basically my daughter's heart was pulled like in the wrong direction. So Rebbe sent back coriander, which is kuzbera, which is kusberta, right? Basically, you have to kill your daughter, right? Your daughter did something wrong. You have to kill her. So he sent back a leek. Off my line. So Rebbe sent back less, right? With mercy on your daughter, right? Chas, like as in like to have like chesed, or anyway. So, chas means to have mercy on her. So the whole thing was sending vegetables back and forth, and they understood the message. Another thing, Antoninus used to send Rebbe crushed gold every day, like as a gift, and he hid it under the wheat. Rebbe said, a lot of money. I don't need more money. It's okay. So Antoninus said, listen, you might not need any money, but your children and your grandchildren might need money, right? Again, there's no investment banking and there's no bonds. He's like, hide this gold under your mattress, because even if you don't need it, the next generation will need it, right? And they might be terrible. Okay, how did they meet? So, I mean, like, how did they get together? Antoninus actually had a tunnel that went into Rebbe's house so that he can go there every day. And he would take 2 slaves with him. And basically, he left one on one side and one on the other side. And he would kill them at the end of the day so that nobody knew that he was going to Rebbe. This is Antoninus, the Roman emperor, not Rebbe. And he told Rebbe, listen, I don't want anyone in your house. I don't want anybody to know that I'm coming. One time, Antoninus comes to the house, and Rabbi Hanina Bar Chama was there. And he gets very upset. He says, Rebbe, well, how could there be somebody here? So he says, oh, don't worry. This isn't a person. He's actually an angel. He says, oh, really? He's an angel? Okay, tell him to bring my servant here. But he had already killed the servant. So he's like, what am I supposed to do? So he davened and basically brought him back to life and did Tchiyat HaMetim. He resurrected him. And this way, Antoninus thought that he really was an angel. Antoninus would serve Rebbe every day. He would say, climb on my back and like step on me to get to your bed, right? And he said, right, and he says, I want to be a mat for you in the next world. And then he says, Rebbe, am I going to the next world? Do I have a portion in the next world? And Rebbe said, yes, right? Even though, and we've seen this before and we'll see it again, right? Rome is a descendant, we believe, from Esav, who is right terrible. And Rebbe said, listen, you're not acting like Esav, you're acting, very pious, very righteous, and therefore you will have a portion in the next world. Okay, then the Gemara says, speaking of Romans that get a portion in the next world, there's the story of Ketia Bar Shalom, another like famous story. The Ketia Bar Shalom, the Gemara tells us, is also going to the next world, to Gan Eden. What's the story? A Caesar wanted to kill all the Jews, and Ketia said, no, don't kill the Jews. right? They're scattered all over. And if you kill them, so then like there's going to be like holes all over your kingdom. And they're going to call you the leader of, right, a severed kingdom, because like you're going to not have a lot of people in your kingdom. So the Caesar agreed to not kill the Jews, but then got mad at Katia because he's like, you gave me Musar, right? You told me what to do, and I don't like that. So he decided to kill him. So Katia says, okay, if I'm going to die, so I want to make sure that I'm going to the right place. So what did he do? He gave himself a circumcision. He did a brit milah before he was killed, and he left all of his property to Rabbi Akiva and to the other rabbis. And as he was going out to get killed, a heavenly voice came out, a bat kol came out and said, right, you are invited into Olam Haba, right? You are invited to the next world. And here the Gemara says, right, this is a very famous line. I'll tell you in Hebrew and then I'll translate, right? Yesh shekone olamo b'sha'a echat, v'yesh shekone olamo b'kama shanim. Right? What does this mean? A person can acquire a portion in the next world in a split second, and a person can acquire his portion over many years, right? The idea is that this was someone who was not Jewish and saw the beauty, right, and protected the Jews. And in that 1 minute, he gets, right, a portion in the next world. So I think this is meant to give everybody hope and inspiration that even if you lead a very colorful life that might not be so in line with Jewish tradition, I think the Gemara is saying you can turn yourself around in 1 second. So I think it's just a very powerful message. Okay, Daf 11, another, so this, now we're going from, we did Roman emperor nice to Jews, Roman person who converts in the last minute. And now we're going to have a very famous convert. I feel like Ilanita is very excited about this. And that is the story of Unkelous. Unkelous was the nephew of the emperor, and he converts to Judaism. If you've ever opened up a Chumash, right, a Bible, it has generally, I mean, not all of them, but most have at least two commentaries. One is Rashi, I would say that would be the most famous, and Unkelous is on the side. Unkelous is actually in Aramaic, right, because that's what they spoke in those days. So it was in those days it's like English, but for us it's much harder to understand. So that is Unkelous. Now, what was so special about Unkelous? So again, he's the emperor's nephew. The emperor is very upset that he converts, and he sends soldiers to bring his nephew back. And basically, every time he sent a group of soldiers, Unkelous would convert the soldiers, right? What would happen, right? They would come and they'd say, your uncle wants you back. And he would say, oh, come sit down. Let me give you some cake and some coffee. And let me tell you something, right? So he would tell the soldiers, it's interesting, like in general, you would have right, a king, and the servants of the king would hold a torch in front of the king, and that's how the king would walk around. But you know what? For the Jews in the desert, right, who held up the light for the Jews? It was God, right? God is so great, but he also, right, humbles himself, you can say, or he loves the Jewish people so much that he led them in the desert. And they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. We also want to be Jewish. That sounds like a great idea. And then they would convert. So then, right, and they never come back. So then the emperor sends another group of soldiers, and he says to them, right, normally, right, the soldiers stand outside the king's house and they protect the king. But what does Hashem do? right? Hashem, right? We put a mezuzah on the outside of our door because God, as if, right, is outside our door protecting us. And they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. We also want to be Jewish, right? And basically, each group of soldiers converts to Judaism. And again, the emperor gets so upset and he's like, stop talking to him, don't say anything, but it doesn't work. And basically he gives up trying to bring him back. Okay. Back to our Mishnah. So the day that the king dies, again, the Roman king becomes a pagan festival. And remember, we said maybe only if they burnt his possessions, maybe not, right? Maybe it doesn't matter if they burnt it, maybe only if they burnt it, right? So there's a machloket, when is it a pagan holiday? However, interestingly, the Gemara tells us that they actually used to burn the things, the possessions of a Jewish king. And you might think, and this is going to come up later on in our Masachet, but it starts here. There's a concept called chukat goyim, which means, right, the laws or the customs of the non-Jews. Again, non-Jews means pagans here. And there is a tradition that we are not supposed to do things that the pagans do, right? Again, I'm not talking about things that are directly connected to idolatry. That's obvious that we're not allowed to do that, and we'll talk more about that in this Masachet. But we're also not, if it's something that, oh, that's what the pagans do, then we're not supposed to do it. Small things, right? It could be the way they wear their clothes, the way they act, right? We're not supposed to be like them. So the Gemara asks, wait a minute, how are we burning the possessions of a Jewish king? Isn't that chukat goyim? So the Gemara says, no, we do it. It's not connected to idolatry. It's connected to how important that king is. The more important the king is, the more they burn, basically. And the Gemara tells us that they actually do it for Tzidkiyahu, and he was very righteous. So there is a case where it has nothing to do with idolatry. They would burn their bed, they would burn their personal items. And it says that Unkelous actually burnt Rabban Gamliel's things when he died as a sign of respect for Rabban Gamliel. Okay. They also would maim the king's horse after he died. We're going to talk a little bit more about this idea, but I don't know what it's called in English, but basically you detach a tendon where the hoof is attached to the leg, and I guess you hobble it. Thank you. Right, you hobble the horse so that it can't walk. And the idea is, as we know, right, the king's horse was unique to him, and nobody's allowed to ride on it because it was his horse. Okay, then we talked about another holiday, which is the day that they shaved the king's beard, and they shaved off his blorit. Blorit could either be like, if he had a hair maybe on the front, or he had like a ponytail. It seems that these were two separate days. The beard and the ponytail were like two separate days. There was another holiday once every 70 years in Rome. What would they do? They would take a person and they would ride him on top of, they would put him on top of a person who is lame. And the idea is it's supposed to symbolize Yaakov, Esav and Yaakov, right? Again, remember we said Rome is Esav, Yaakov is the Jews, and remember Yaakov gets into a fight with the angel, and he's limping, if you remember. So the lame person is Yaakov, is supposed to be like the Jews. And the healthy man on top is supposed to be the Romans, Esav. And basically, they show how, right, look, God thought, right? You think your God is so smart, but your God said that Yaakov was going to be stronger than Esau. But look, Esau is stronger, right? The Romans are stronger than the Jews. They would do this once every 70 years. And right, basically to show how our God was wrong and their gods are right powerful, and they're all powerful. So these are all Roman holidays. The Gemara gives another list of Persian holidays and Babylonian holidays, right? Again, depending on where you lived and who was in power. Again, any local pagan holiday, you could not do business with them around those holidays. Then the Gemara talks about 5 famous houses of idolatry, and these were established houses, and therefore it doesn't even have to be on a festival. You are not allowed to do any business with these houses, right? Because they are constantly worshiping these idols. Okay, next Mishnah on the bottom of Daf 11. A city that celebrates the holiday of the pagans, of the idolaters, you can do business with people outside of the city. Or again, if they celebrate it outside, you can do business on the inside, right? So vice versa. Let's say there's only one road to that city, so you're not allowed to go on that road on the day of the holiday because it looks like you're going to celebrate in that city. But if the road continues to another city, so then you can take that road. Okay, now the Gemara explains what are these places? What are these cities? So the Gemara actually, was it crazy, right? The Gemara talks about the animal market of Aza, right? Aza is one of the 5 pagan cities in Israel, basically. And that animal market is outside of the city, and therefore you can do business in that market. So now the Gemara wants to understand, how is it possible that you're doing business with these pagans? So Daf 12 tells us that Jews and idolaters are allowed to cook their food on the same stove, meaning you put a pot here and I put a pot there. That is okay. Now, why would it not be okay? You might be nervous that maybe the idolater is going to put non-kosher meat into the Jewish person's pot. So the Gemara says we're not nervous about that, and therefore you could do it. So too, you can trade in the animal market in Aza, and you don't have to be concerned that the money that's in the market is idolatrous money, right? Meaning money that was used for idolatry, or pagans who had them in their wallet, but it was involved in some sort of pagan worship. We don't have to be concerned about that in the market. Or maybe the issue is that we're scared that the non-Jew is going to cook the food right on the stove, or maybe where the other concern could be that food can splash from one pot to another. And therefore, you could maybe do business on before the holiday, and you don't have to be concerned about the money, but not on the holiday itself. Okay, we said you can't go to that city or be seen coming out of the city because people might think that you were going there to worship idols. But if you're going to a different place, then that would be okay. Now, the Gemara tells us you have to be very careful around idols, right? So you can't bend down and remove a thorn and do it in front of an idol because it looks like you're bowing down to the idol, right? You can't pick up a coin that fell in front of the idol. Again, it looks like you're bowing down. And also, if there's a spring, right, you can't drink from the water if there's an idol right there. And the Gemara talks about the fountains, and they actually have this all over Rome and in many places, that there would be fountains, let's say like for like a water spout, and the where the water came out would be the face of a god or an idol, and the water would like come out of his mouth, right? So the Gemara says you have to be very careful that you don't put your mouth on that spout, because it looks like you're kissing that god, right? So again, it's interesting to like think about these fountains and idol worship. Okay. Also, since we're talking about drinking from public fountains, you should be very careful not to drink from an open pipe, because it's very dangerous because of leeches. And that's self-explanatory. Okay. Since we're talking about that, the Gemara says that you shouldn't drink directly from a river or a pond because it's dangerous. You don't like, meaning don't put your face into the water to drink. Rather, right, this is not about idolatry. This is about leeches, right? You don't know what's in the water. But you can take water with your hand, right? Look at it, make sure there's nothing gross in your water in your hand, and then you can drink it. And this is just very dangerous. You shouldn't drink water in the middle of the night if it was open. Again, maybe there's a demon there. Apparently there were demons around the water. But if you go to drink water with two people, it's okay. Demons don't like two people. So then that is okay. But if you're alone and there's nothing to do, the Gemara gives you something to say to get rid of this demon, and then you can drink the water. So if you want to know, that is on Daf 12. Okay, next Mishnah. We have a city of idolaters. And some stores are decorated for the holiday, again, of this idol worship. And with like, for the idol, and some are not decorated. And the Gemara talks about Beit Sha'an, that is a city in the Galil, I guess it's called, I think it's the Galil, right under the Kinneret. It exists today. It was a very famous, actually like Jewish and pagan, but a lot of pagans, a lot of idolaters lived in Beit Sha'an. It's very hot there. Don't go there in the summer. I mean, you could, but it's really hot. But if you go there in the winter, there's amazing archaeology there. So in Beit Sha'an, it says you can do business with the non-decorated stores because it means that they don't give their money to either the priest or to the idol or to the temple. So the Gemara explains, again, maybe only if it's decorated with a certain decoration, with roses or hadass, which is myrtle, because what would they do? They would put these things in front of the idol, and then they would hang it in their store. And now you're smelling something that was used for idolatry, and that is really problematic. But if it's decorated with fruit, so that's okay because that had nothing to do with that. You're not benefiting from the idol worship. Daf 13 tells us that no, even if it has fruit, you shouldn't go to that store because you're giving them benefit because you are. So Rashi actually says that these stores, right, if they're decorated, it means that they were owned by the priests of the temple, of the pagans, and therefore, if you can't buy from them, because if you buy from them, the money is going straight to the idols. Okay, now we have a problem. So the Gemara gives us a case of where they said, we're going to cancel taxes for anybody who wears this wreath in honor of this idol. So now we have a problem. Why? Because if you wear the wreath, you're benefiting from idolatry. But if you, if you wear the wreath, if you wear the wreath, so you are benefiting because you're not going to pay taxes. But if you don't, then they're going to be benefiting because you're going to pay them taxes, right? Again, remember we said we don't want to give the non-Jews the money. So what do? So the Gemara says you shouldn't do any business with these people at all because it's too complicated, right? Because they're basically going to win either way. Okay, we are not allowed to buy from a merchant who is going to give taxes to the idols, again, to you understand, the priests or the temple, whatever it is. But you can buy from a homeowner who is selling things because they don't pay taxes to the idol, right, to the idols. Now, if you buy an animal from an idolater on his holiday, so then you have to cut the tendon, right, you have to like hobble it, as we said, because, right, we want to make sure that, right, because we don't want you getting benefit from these idolaters. Now, that's buying an animal from them. What if you buy a slave from them? So the Gemara says, right, first of all, you're allowed to buy Jewish slaves from non-Jews. That's actually good. You're redeeming them. But if it's a non-Jew, not obviously, but I'll say obviously, you do not have to name the slave, right? He's not an animal. He's a person. We don't want to cause him to die, so you don't do anything. Now the Gemara actually says, right, it's like a machloket. Are you allowed to buy a non-Jewish slave from these non-Jews? One opinion is no. Another opinion is yes, because if you remember, we said that when you buy a non-Jew, when you buy a slave, we actually convert them. So we are bringing them into Judaism, and that's actually a good thing. Okay. There are a lot of stories about these sages who bought things from these idolaters in their market on their holiday. So the question is, how were they allowed to do that? They were allowed to do it because they were private homeowners, and as we said, they don't give taxes to the priests of the temple. Okay, last Mishnah for today. You cannot sell the following items to idolaters. This turnita, bnot shuach, we're going to say what these are: stems, frankincense, a white rooster, or if it's in a group of roosters, you can put a white rooster there, or even if it's alone, but you maim it, like you take off one of the toes. Again, why we don't want to name animals, right? We have the concept of tsar ba'alei chayim. We don't want animals to suffer. However, we do want to prevent them from using this as a sacrifice to their god, and therefore you maim the animal, right? You take off a toe so that they will not use it for sacrifices. And also palm trees, you're not allowed to sell to these idolaters. Okay, daf 14, the Gemara tells us, what are we talking about? It's not the trees, rather it's the acorns, and bnot shuach are these white figs with stems, and basically they would hang them in front of the idol, and therefore, again, we want to prevent idolatry. Livona, which is frankincense, when it was really good quality, again, they would use it for idol worship, therefore we don't want to sell it. The same thing with the white rooster. Again, depending on, right, if they say, I want a white rooster, that means that they're going to use it for a sacrifice, and therefore you're not allowed to sell it. But if they just say, I want a rooster, you could give them the white one because it means that they, want to have it for a barbecue. We said that you can't sell them good quality palm trees or anything connected to the land of Israel. So then maybe we're talking about the fruit. If it's poor quality, you can sell them the fruit, but not the tree. And with that, we end today's class. The Ezrat Hashem, we should just hear good news. I see we have a few more minutes, so if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes.
Can you extrapolate in one sentence so we can relate to all of the holidays that you mentioned, the idolaters' holidays? I mean, if someone invites you to go to something now, where do we stand now?
It's an excellent question. It is an excellent question. I think also, I mean, I think we'll have to talk about this at the end of the Masechet, how we define idolatry. You know, some people asked about, you know, Christianity, Catholicism. You know, there's a lot of talk about this, and it is a good question. As I mentioned last week, we have a tradition that we do not go into churches.
Ever?
Ever.
Okay, well, there's something you're teaching
so
me.
that is something I would say churches that are in use, that you know that are in use. So that would be right. So if you were invited to your Catholic friend's wedding, right? So again, like, could you go to the party if the ceremony is in a church? That is quite problematic. I am not giving any rulings, but that is problematic. Obviously, if we're talking about real, I don't want to say real, when we're talking about like idolatry, like if you go to the Far East, Zohar asked at the beginning about Buddhism, right? If you go to the Far East, there are literally statues of Buddha and people bow down to him and they burn incense. That is like really problematic. It doesn't mean you can't see it, but you should not really go into their temples. You should not like burn incense in front of it. That is, one could say that is worshiping an idol. So again, we can talk more maybe at the end of the at the end of the Masechah, maybe we can talk more practical. As we know, I'm not talking practical just yet. So Naomi just put in a comment that she had to vote in a church, and she asked if that was okay. Again, right, if it's something that you have to do, that might be different than, you know, going on a tour where it's just for pleasure. One could make a distinction. So I think ask your local Orthodox rabbi, but this is the Masechet that deals with all of those things. So yeah. Any other?
I wanted to say something about, you said about Adam Rishon, the Adam. We see in the Psukim that there was no nighttime between Friday and Shabbat, because every day it says Vayivoka Yom Rishon Yom Sheni, and after Friday it doesn't say Vayichulu Hashamayim Va'aretz, and then Vayanach B'Yom Shvi. In other words, it was one runoff day between Friday morning and Motzei Shabbat. And so Adam Rishon, when he saw the sun setting Motzei Shabbat, he thought that because of his sin that the world was being destroyed, and that's when Hashem showed him how to make fire.
Exactly.
And that's why Motzei Shabbat we do the candle.
Exactly. That's how we have the candle of Havdalah is on Saturday night. Exactly. Yeah. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. The amazing stuff, the stuff about Antoninus, of course, those stories, amazing. I just wanted to take you back a couple of months when we talked about Rabbi Yishmael, because I never got to follow up with you, Rabbanit, that I had asked the question, you know, because they were discussing people being named for him and making names and different things. Anyway, I said, why in the world would anyone, a Jew, be naming their child Yishmael, whatever? And you said, well, it's probably because of Rabbi Ishmael. So I said, well, I'll look it up. I did go look it up in the introduction to the Talmud, which is a fantastic volume that Art Scroll put out with their whole edition. And it has a huge section on Rabbi Ishmael. And I got all caught up on all of his amazing contributions. And so I just wanted to let you know that was very fruitful, and I'd recommend anybody to check him out.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. That is an excellent, by the way, you're correct. It's an excellent volume. If anybody's interested in historical background to the Talmud and different personalities, here, Ilanit is showing you. Move it back a little bit. Yeah, right. That's the introduction to the Talmud. It's Art Scroll. It is excellent. It has like historical context. It goes through many of the major rabbis that are discussed in the Mishnah and the Gemara. So agreed. Excellent. Okay.
I always love to hear when Rabbi Bravender when he brings a source of some rabbi who said whatever, then he gives a little bit of the background of that rabbi, and I think it's just sort of like it expands your perception of what is being said, and it gives you context on the times, etc. You know, and it's like and some more information. I must say I'm terrible in history, but in such a way I get to delve into things that I couldn't have done before. You know, just teaching you dates and names I wouldn't remember. But if you give it in a context of a background, then that I can absorb that.
Yes, agreed. And I think that a lot of these stories give us a picture, a window into who these rabbis are and what their personalities are. And, you know, were they rich? Were they poor? Were they tall? Were they short? Were they, right? Were blind? We really do. And it does affect, you know, their rulings and their personalities, obviously. So correct. Yeah. Really very powerful. And I definitely encourage, you know, more learning, more research. It is always, we are all constantly learning. So it's really beautiful. Okay, thank you everyone so much.
Guys.
And Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll see you next week. Wishing everyone quiet times and a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat.